And let's hop right into it. I am going to share my screen, and my apologies. And first of all, thanks to Wayne who let me know that I sent out the reminder that said here's the day 6 manual, but I didn't have the manual. So now we have the manual, and everybody should be good there. So okay, and let me just see if I can. Well, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. We're going to zoom in, make it a little easier for everybody to see. Okay, so here's what I've got, folks. We are going to talk today about foundations of web design. What are some of the things that when you're designing a website, what do you want to make sure that you do exactly? So, or what do you want to avoid doing? Now, one of them is being intentional about a focal point. A focal point is something that your eye is drawn to. Okay. And if your eye should be drawn to a particular area on a website, and if it's drawn to that area of the website, that's great. If it's drawn to multiple areas of that website, you have to make a choice. And we don't like to give folks too many choices to make, because when they have to make choices, they have to think about it. We want to be able to make it very easy for people to consume. You know, I go to a restaurant, well, when everybody used to go to restaurants, but I used to go to restaurants like, I think like a Casey's or a Kelsey's, and you get these massive menus, and they'd have like 50,000 things in them, and you could spend a half an hour just reading the menu over and over and over, all the things that you could choose to buy. Whereas if you went to a restaurant where, you know, they had 10 mains that you could order, much easier than when you have to choose 50. And we're using that same principle here. You can see this website here. First of all, I have to choose which side to look on. And then I'm actually really confused. There's a lot of things going on here. I don't even know what this is. So there's a whole lot of things that are not good on this website. Let me pop over to this website and show you this one here. Okay. So for this website, and I've showcased this one. I was talking with a mortgage broker the other day, and I saw the website that of one of the companies he's a part of, and I looked at this website and I was like, oh my goodness, you know, it kind of looks nice, but this is awful, awful to look at, in my opinion. First of all, this top bar over here, this is just a mess.
What do you really think, Trevor?
Well, because I don't know what to look at. There's so many things there. This one here, at first blush, it actually looks kind of nice. But what, any of you want to guess what I think the focal point of this website is?
I think it's a dating game.
Well, I think the focal point of this is her face.
Yeah.
And it's like, relax and let us get you a better deal. That's great. Or find a mortgage professional. So I've got 3 things I should look at. And I actually have to make the choice of what I'm going to look at. And so I end up looking at her face. Okay, just saying, these are things that are tricky to do, and anybody can fall into these things. But this, in my opinion, is very bad design. We'll keep on going. This one here, they've got this nice little section here, but they have the 2 of them so close together. Which one am I supposed to look at, this section or this section? And when I look at this section, am I supposed to read this or look at this picture? This one here, again, I'm given a choice. Should I look at this? It's all really small. Or should I look at this? And then we get to the bottom, and you know, I talk to folks about a call to action, and it's really important to have a call to action. So you get to the bottom of the website. Oh, actually, we're not there yet. This one here, There's a lot of choice, but this breaks another rule here. What's the learn more associated with? They put in so much white space underneath it that it doesn't feel like it's a part of this.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I get to the very bottom, and the footer of a good website. The footer of a good website is where you can look and it's like, okay, I can find the contact information. I can find a bunch of different details of information that that can be helpful for me. But because they've put photos in here, they've made this feel like this is a really important section. And now I've got to choose what to do. What should I choose? By the way, they got the learn more a little bit better on this section than they did this one up here. So again, it's focal points, choice. There's a lot not to like here. Okay, so don't be like these folks when you get your website done. Okay, I won't beat them up anymore. It was a fantastic example, so I figured I should show it to you. Okay.
The site map was for the front page. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, it's so much. But the next thing that is really important to be careful about is contrast. If you have somebody, first of all, for anybody, this is hard to read.
Well, you need a weight on it. You need weight.
Okay, now this is lorem ipsum text, so that makes it even harder unless you're really good with your Latin. But you can see the contrast here is terrible. And I mentioned a little bit later, anything with when you need to make sure your contrast is good. People will also put text on top of photos, and you can see how difficult it is to read. Okay, you know, this is terrible, this is better, although I don't think this is great because I'm really not a fan of tinting images just so you can make text better. It does work in some cases, but this definitely doesn't work. Okay, here's one here. Here's a personal injury lawyer. Terrible contrast. You know, actually, let me go to his website so you can see it better. None of this is easy to read. One, he's tried to, the designer on this tried to tint the picture, and most of you will recognize this or may recognize this. This is the Burlington Skyway. Yeah, Burlington Skyway. So this is really hard to read. And especially you can see once it gets to the blue, they're trying to emphasize the blue, but they've made it hard to read, even harder to read than the white because it's blue on this.
It's too busy too.
Absolutely, it's very busy. Okay, now contrast. You need to know that. Well, actually, you don't need to know, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about things when it comes to contrast. There are people who have difficulty reading websites, people who are sight impaired, people who are colorblind. It is a sight impairment and causes it difficult for people to read things. Particular with anything with red and green is colorblind, but there are people who are blind who need to be able to read websites. Okay. If you are a company that has more than 50 employees in Ontario, if you're some government organizations in the US, there are different regulations that you need to meet in order to be able to, in order to be able to make it easy for people with disabilities. So it's called accessibility. So there's accessibility for buildings, there's accessibility for websites. If you are marketing to people who need accessibility, there are ways to do that. It's not cheap to do it, but we can get into those. There are artificial intelligence tools which can you make your website mostly compliant. Okay. There's a tool called Max Access .io, and it uses artificial intelligence. It's some folks out on the west coast of the US who've created it. There's very few tools that do this, but they're one of them. And for about $700 a year, you can get your website to be compliant with accessibility. Okay. In case you're curious, there's something worldwide called WCAG, WCAG. In Ontario, it's the AODA or AODA. And in the States, it's ADA. Won't get into getting through what all of those mean and everything, but if you got any questions about that, give me a shout. Okay. If you want to check your website or something you're doing from a design perspective, here's a couple of tools you can look at. The first one is you can just actually look at, how does white text look on a blue background, or how does light gray look on a white background? Is the colors I'm choosing, is it compliant? Is the contrast easy to be compliant for the standards for people who are sight impaired? Okay. There's also one where you can just feed in your website and find out how well that web page is doing. Again, I don't want to go fully into these things here. You guys can check out that if you're interested.
Okay.
It interests me, but just in interest of time, and I expect most of you just need to be able to make sure your website doesn't look like this. Okay. So here we go. And if you could just make sure you're on mute just as we're going through here, unless you've got a specific question. Thanks. Minimize the number of choices. If you were to go back 10 or 15 years ago, this would have been one of the leaders in the space of doing search. Today, I would be very surprised if many of you are going to Yahoo to be able to do any kind of search. But 10 or 15 years ago, you would be going to one of these for search. Okay. But then there came out on these folks here, which is easier to make when you have too many choices. It makes it much harder for people to make a choice. Keep it simple. These guys, in addition to being simple to choose, spent hundreds of millions and now hundreds of billions of dollars to make search good. So that also helped them. Okay. There's a study that was done in California where they compared grocery stores which had a certain number of jams that they could buy. One of them had 24 and one of them had 6. And you can see the conversion rate. People would see the 24 and they weren't sure which one to choose. Another one would be the other one that had 6, and they had a much higher purchase rate. Some of you folks may have heard of Costco. One of the reasons Costco is so successful is they provide very few choices. On a side note about Costco, Costco also does other things that, well, at least they used to, except for about the last 8 months, they did a number of things that would increase the amount that people would buy. One of them is disorganization, very few signs. And the last one I'll mention is they tried to make it very confusing at checkout. So you would actually look at what was in other people's shopping carts, because you were like, oh, where was that? And then you'd go back out and look at where somebody else had bought something really good. You might be buying that item as well as something else along the way because of all the confusion. So now getting into my rules here for easily readable text. Here's the rule: short sentences, short paragraphs. If you provide a big paragraph, it makes it very intimidating for people to read. Long sentences too. and short titles. So all of those things, the shorter they are, the easier it is for you to go to a website when you're reading. If it's a really long title, you're probably going to skip over it if you're skimming. If it's a really big paragraph, you're probably not reading it. Okay. If you do all these things, it makes it easy for to feel that you can read it. Okay. Use a lot of titles. People will skim titles. You're reading through a website and you want to find out what it's all about. Inside of 10 or 20 seconds, you just read the titles. People will stop for bulleted lists, especially if they're short. No full width text. Full width text is very hard to read. Newspapers have known this for a long, long time. Okay, we don't need to try and figure out how to overdo on the full width text, or we don't need to try and prove that newspapers were wrong. Make your text less wide. Okay, now and I'll just, let me hop over here. I'll show you on my website what we do here. First of all, you can go, oh, there we go. Story, not the star. First of all, you can see even on my website here, I don't go with full width text even on the title, although you can go with full width text on the title. Okay. And each of these, I've tried to columnize it. Again, not full width. The max I usually do is 2/3 width. Okay. If I've got a bunch of text here, try an image on the side so I can get it down to half width. Half width is really easy to read. Okay. Okay, all the way through. See, even here, instead of going full width, I've gone half width in the center. All the way through, tried to columnize it and make it less than full width, 2/3 max in my opinion. Although you half width is much more ideal. Order things logically. Don't think I need to expand upon that at all. Use easily readable fonts. Okay, I've got a client here, Pause Playgrounds. For a artistic effect, we have Toronto Dog Daycare and Dog Boarding. But note that this is a little bit more difficult to read than this text is here. Okay, we do not use this font really anywhere else on the website because it's hard to read. Okay, so if you're going to use this kind of a font, be very sparingly about it. Don't use it for a full paragraph of text. Most people will never read it. Okay. And just as a side note here, the easiest fonts to read are called serif fonts. It means they have these little things at the edges of the text, just like the Times Roman does. So the T has these little hanging things on it and on the sides. That actually is much easier to read. Any book you will read will always be written in a serif font, but most websites are actually use sans serif text. Okay. Use bold sparingly, very sparingly. The more you bold, the less, the more confusing it is to read, and nothing becomes emphasized if you start bolding almost everything. Use all caps very sparingly. If you use it all in text, people feel like they're being shouted at. And I mentioned before, don't use green or red for text. Okay. So let's get into here. We're gonna get into promoting your website. I'm just gonna spend about, actually, does anybody have any questions right now on anything related to the design?
What about if people are using mobile devices? Does that affect your screen width? And how does that all work out when they look at these sites on a mobile device?
Well, you kind of brought up the smart point on that. When you're talking about mobile device, all of the things that I talked about still apply. They don't change. They all are still fully relevant. Okay. You normally, if somebody's doing a good job from a design perspective, what they do is they will make sure that the spacing is done correctly, and things are done a little bit differently on mobile phones. So, for example, I'm going to try and show you something right now here on this company here, VisaPath. Is in with VisaPath. Let me just see here if it shows. Yeah. Okay. First of all, this this website, when you see it on mobile, it actually displays differently than it does even here. I can't fake it up, but I'll show you one example here. This example here, I don't show her image on a smartphone. It's really long. It doesn't provide any value to show a visual of her on a smartphone on there. This is attractive. This creates it. What we do is we actually provide just a square of her video on a mobile. So we do that differently. So there's little things that we'll think about to make sure that the experience is good when we're working on a mobile, and we may design it specifically for mobile. Whenever we're doing it for home pages for our clients, we normally will uniquely design their homepage for them on mobile to make sure it's a very good experience. Okay. Promoting your website. Okay. Oh, Dale, were you cleaning your screen or were you waving? I think Dale was cleaning his screen. I saw it looked like somebody waving. Google My Business. Okay, for most of you, you know that when you do a search and you do a search for something on Google, you want to find it. So on Google, when you do search for something, when you're setting up your website, most of you will want to register with Google My Business. There's all kinds of places out there will tell you how to do it. There's all kinds of directions out there that you can check out, but there's two reasons for listing on Google My Business. First one is that Google My Business is really for helping your business be found locally. If you have a physical location that people come to, this is very powerful. Or you're a local business, you really want to sell to people in your geographic area. Google My Business will help you get ranked locally. The second reason is people read reviews all the time. And they will read the reviews or the testimonials you have on your website, but they don't always, they're like, well, I want to believe it, but I'm not sure I believe it. If they go to Google My Business, they're much more likely to believe the reviews that are there. So this is really ground zero for most people for promoting your website on the internet. Okay. Bing, you can actually go to Bing. There is another search engine called Bing. Some people search on it particularly because it's integrated so significantly within Windows. You should at least make sure that you register with Bing. Apple Maps. If people are going to be driving to your location, make sure you register with Apple Maps, because not everybody uses Google Maps on their iPhone. You want to make sure those iPhone users using Apple Maps can find you. If you are doing more of a business to consumer piece, you may want to register on Facebook Business as well. That should be another place where you're getting reviews. My company, relevant directories. So really Google My Business is in some ways a directory. You want to be found on relevant directories. And for each of you, there may be directories specific to what you do. There may be a coach's directory. There may be somebody who builds a furniture builder directory, a music teacher directory, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure that there's an MBA coach a directory, but maybe there's one out there. And for my company, there's a company called Clutch. We list on there. We get people to give us reviews on there. And this is a source of a lot of leads that we get for our company. But Clutch means nothing for most of you. You can check and see this is more sort of a technology, software developer, designer directory. Reviews. Get reviewed. Consider where you're going to get the reviews on. Ask people for reviews.